Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. The other day I posted a video about the recent news regarding a new expansion for Warhammer Quest Cursed City called Nightwars. I'm not going to reiterate everything I said in that video here. If you missed it, I'll put a link for you in the video description below. But one of the major takeaways from the announcement was that Games Workshop are not including any miniatures with that expansion. If you want to play the expansion with the intended official Citadel miniatures, you have to buy them all separately, and it doesn't come cheap. That's actually good news for a lot of people. Some people will already own the necessary miniatures to play the expansion because they are a collector, painter, or they are building a Gravelord's army, so for them an expansion that doesn't force them to rebuy miniatures is fantastic. Furthermore, there are some people who like to pick up Games Workshop games without miniatures to keep their costs down, and then they make tokens or standees. Again, for those people, the news about Nightwars is great, but from my general reading of the room, both in comments to my own videos and also comments on Facebook and other forums, I get a sense that there is a lot of backlash to this decision. I know I personally wasn't as excited as I should have been reporting on the new expansion because I predicted a lot of people wouldn't be happy. I mean, I like to spread only good news as much as possible, and this wasn't the news I was hoping to share with everyone. And unfortunately, I'm doubling down on disappointment, because today I wanted to do a quick update on the latest wave of Games Workshop bookshelf games, and in particular, the new Warhammer Quest title Lost Relics. For those of you who aren't aware, every year for the last few years, Games Workshop has produced waves of what I like to call bookshelf games. They are compact, standalone titles with everything in the box you need to play, priced competitively and designed to encourage new blood to get involved in miniatures gaming. And there have been some amazing hits in the range. Particular standouts, for me at least, are Space Marine Adventures Labyrinth of the Necron and Blitz Bowl, two games deeply entrenched in my top 50 list of games. And yes, for anybody interested, I will be publishing a series running down my top 50 games in the not too distant future. The problem with the bookshelf games is they are region locked and exclusive to particular high street stores. In North America you can only get the games from Barnes & Noble, and in Australia you have to rely on EB Games. If you're in the UK, most of the time you're SOL. A few of the games have been made available through the high street video game retailer Game, but not many. Not enough, and not, it would appear, the latest wave. I reported on the new bookshelf games when they were first announced back in February of this year. There are 3 in total. The first is a new edition of Blitz Bowl, which is a streamlined, more accessible version of Blood Bowl. I think it's much better than its big brother. The second is Combat Arena Clash of Champions, a new edition of Combat Arena, which was itself a reskinned edition of Gore Chosen, a game I've reviewed on the channel previously. It's a hex-based skirmish game with up to 4 champions taking lumps out of each other in a fighting pit. It's all guts and glory, and as Gore Chosen was stupid incredible fun, I would expect nothing less from Combat Arena. The third game is the most interesting to me. It's Warhammer Quest Lost Relics, a condensed, refined Warhammer Quest game bearing some similarities to Quest games such as Silver Tower and Shadows over Hammerhal, but with a completely new and pretty interesting rule set. I know the rule set is pretty interesting because Games Workshop made the rules available online, and I was very surprised to see a lot of new and interesting mechanisms, stuff that makes it seem like they have actually put a lot of thought into the design rather than just creating an intentionally cut down version of one of the larger Quest games. I'm not going to dissect the rules here in detail, but I wanted to run through a few things of note. First, there are reactive enemies that automatically trigger based on AI protocols, similar to the programmed actions that enemies from the Dungeons & Dragons board games use. Every time heroes take an action in line of sight, enemies react. I can instantly see how that creates interesting decision points, as every time a hero takes an action, they potentially gift the enemies an action too. You will need to plan your moves carefully to stay out of line of sight and to kill enemies that would benefit from reactions before they have a chance to strike. Too many actions taken carelessly in rooms filled with enemies could be deadly. There are 12 missions included in the box. They are designed for standalone play, with games taking around an hour, but you can also link the missions together into a campaign. The missions make use of fixed board layouts, so there's no exploration as such. There are doors to open, but you already know what's on the other side. The maps are more like large multi-roomed arenas than traditional dungeons, something more like Cursed City than Silver Tower. The game still makes use of Warhammer Quest's action dice system, where you roll dice to determine what you can do in your turn, but there are several differences from previous Quest titles. First of all, you don't lose dice when you take damage. Instead, you have a double-sided hero card. When you have accumulated enough damage, you flip the card to a wounded state. Take enough damage again, and you are removed from play. This is more akin to something like Space Marine Adventures than Warhammer Quest. It's also interesting to note that the action dice are used in a different way to what we might expect. First of all, most actions still have a number in brackets after the name, for example, move 2+. In Quest games, that normally means you have to spend an action dice that matches or exceeds that number to take the action. Not here. You can use any dice to take any action. It actually doesn't matter what the number on the dice is. However, if you do spend a dice that matches or exceeds the number listed, you take an inspired action. That's a super-powered version of the action. For example, taking an inspired move action lets you move further, barge through enemies, or disengage from combat. Speaking of disengaging, there are engagement rules in this game lifted straight from Claustrophobia. If the number of enemies on a space equals or exceeds the number of heroes, you can't leave the space. If the number of heroes exceeds the number of enemies, you can move freely. And the other interesting thing about action dice is there is a chaining mechanism. Normally, as soon as you complete an action, you trigger reactions from the enemies. However, if you perform an action using a dice with a value of 1, any player can immediately make an action as long as they have a dice with a value of 2. After that, any player can immediately make an action if they have a dice with a value of 3. It's possible to chain up to 6 actions in this way, denying enemy reactions until the point the chain breaks. And heck if that doesn't all sound really good to me. Obviously I've not seen the game in motion, I haven't played through a few turns to see how it all hangs together, but I'm seeing a lot of room in the design for clever tactical play and interesting conundrums. Agonising choices over how to spend your dice to create chains, while also hitting the inspired actions you need to get the most out of your activations. It sounds good. There's even something in the game that I never expected to see in a Quest title: deterministic combat. When you make an attack action, you automatically inflict the damage listed for the attack. If you make a regular attack, you use the base damage. If you make an inspired attack, you inflict significantly more damage. And monsters soak that damage in pretty much the same way as they soak damage in the old game Gears of War from Fantasy Flight Games. If you inflict enough damage to equal the monster's resilience, you kill it outright. Otherwise you flip the monster token to a wounded side, regardless of how much damage you inflicted. If you inflict at least 1 damage on a wounded monster, you kill it. So what we have here is a game that is drawing on elements from, among other titles, Cursed City, Shadows over Hammerhal, the Dungeons & Dragons adventure game system, Space Marine Adventures, Claustrophobia, and Gears of War. There isn't a bad game in that list. But of course a game has to be more than the sum of its parts. There's no telling if this is going to be a magnificent beast or a Frankenstein's monster. And unfortunately, for some people, it will be difficult to find out. Recently, the game went up for pre-order on Barnes & Noble for $49.99. It was supposed to come out beginning of September, but it's been pushed back a few weeks to September 24th. That's good news for people across the pond. The bad news is for other territories. A quick glance at the Lost Relics website indicates that the game is only available in the United States, Germany, and Australia. For the moment at least, there is no sign the game will appear in game stores in the UK or in any other territories. Of course that may change, but I doubt it, especially considering game stores seem to have great difficulty getting stock of the last wave of bookshelf titles. Maybe they decided it wasn't worth pursuing for this new crop. Anyway, it's a shame, and it's sure to create additional unrest among Warhammer Quest fans who were already feeling the sting of the recent news regarding the Cursed City expansion. Lost Relics could have been a nice little distraction, and something to tide over people who dipped out on Cursed City until a new big Quest game comes along. It's also disappointing that most territories still won't get to experience the pure joy of Blitz Bowl. But there we go. It is what it is. Obviously, I will report if I hear of any changes to the distribution of these games. And before I go, I did just want to briefly mention something regarding miniatures for Lost Relics. The game only comes with hero miniatures. all the enemies are cardboard tokens, which is to be expected with these bookshelf games where the intention is to keep them accessible and relatively competitively priced. Also, the tokens are part of the gameplay as you flip them when enemies take damage. But it is worth noting that all of the enemies are from Warhammer Underworlds warbands. If you decide you wanted to replace all of the tokens with the identical miniatures, you're going to need the following warband sets. The Sepulchral Guard, that's the skeletons. Zarbag's Gits, that's the grots with their cheerful squig friends. Iron Skull's Boys, that's the Aurochs. Spiteclaw's Swarm, those are the Skaven from the first wave of Underworlds releases, not the newer ones. And finally, Eyes of the Nine, the Tzeentch warband. That's something to ponder while you're waiting for your pre-order to arrive. If, you're somewhere where you can pre-order. And that's about it from me for now. We're pretty much all up to date on Warhammer Quest news, I believe, so we can get back to painting and playing. That's always so much more fun than trying to figure out what the heck Games Workshop are up to. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.